The Oklahoma Sooners announced their presence in a dominating fashion with a 73-0 victory over Arkansas State to begin the 2023 season. My name is Jason Rain. Welcome to Oklahoma Postgame Live. We're simulcasting today both on the Oklahoma channel and the Big 12 channel. So welcome in, settle in with us for the next hour or so, and let's talk about this game throughout all parts of the game and give you my thoughts and any comments, questions, anything that you guys have on your side. Would certainly love to hear it. So just before we get there, just make sure that you guys are following us. After every OU game, we will have post game live with myself, talking about everything about the game. Your reactions, our reactions, kind of thoughts, looking ahead, things to kind of consider. And then, unfortunately, we had to miss yesterday due to a emergency that I had to take care of. But typically, we'll do our Sooner Tailgate Live every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. So make sure that you guys are joining in, and then follow me on X at JasonRay1. Your host here for the voice of college football for the Oklahoma channel and the Big 12 channel. So make sure that you guys are following both. You like and subscribe to both of those, and we'll kind of get cranking with those simulcasts on the OU channel as well as the new Big 12 channel for this year. And obviously there's an SEC channel that we'll get to next year as well. So enough about that. Let's kind of talk about the game. So I think first and foremost, certainly you understand the opponent was not the strongest opponent in the world. And I think it'll be interesting to see as the weeks go, how bad is this Arkansas State team? Was this just a ridiculously bad team, or is there a decent amount of improvement that we've seen out of the Oklahoma team? And I think there's probably a little bit of both that can be attributed to that, right? So I'll go through a lot of the goods, and then maybe just a couple of things to watch for that some teams might be able to. A lot of teams might be able to kind of take advantage of throughout the year. But first, let's kind of talk about on the offensive side of the ball, the positives. Dylan Gabriel looked really good. Didn't play in the second half, but was really efficient, over 300 yards passing. I believe only 3 incompletions on the day. Looked good, looked smooth, was moving around a little bit better than you can tell. At least that I could tell, looked a little bit quicker, looked a little bit more decisive. Again, not a whole lot in terms of what he was being from a pressure perspective, what he was being asked to do right there. So yeah, I think that looked really solid. We'll have to continue to monitor that, obviously, as the season goes and as the games get closer, games get tougher, I should say. But absolutely, I think the running back by committee looked good. Tawi Walker, to me, looked like the best back that played today. I think there was a lot of eyebrows being raised in terms of, okay, is there a little bit of a panic in terms of with him starting versus, what's going on with Javonte Barnes, what's going on with Gavin Sawchuk. And so I think it's a little bit of both, right? You've seen some nicks and bruises, and we didn't see Sawchuk today being held out. And Barnes played a little bit there as well. But yeah, I think at a minimum where you're at, if you're an Oklahoma fan, is you have to love the depth that you've seen across that running back room. I think you've got 4 or 5 guys that you feel really comfortable with playing. With Marcus Major, with Tawi Walker, Gavin Sawchuk, and Javonte Barnes. Maybe even in a pinch, you could have a Caleb Hicks there as well. But yeah, really good stuff by our running backs. I think probably for me, the biggest, I don't know if success is the right word, but the thing that I liked the best was looking at our receiving core. They looked much improved over what they were a year ago. I think you've got guys where Andrew Anthony was not even remotely able to be covered at all during this game. So I had a couple of good deep shots. So I think he'll be the guy that will be able to take the top off the defense a little bit. Jalil Farouk, had a couple of runs, wasn't able to get going a lot in terms of from a receiving perspective. Gavin Freeman, Drake Stoops, Jaden Gibson, Nick Anderson. So I think you've got about 7 or 8 guys that you feel comfortable with right now, and we'll continue to see what that pecking order looks like as the season goes on. There. So from an offensive line perspective, I think it was a little bit up and down. I think I'm interested to see Gabe's analysis, after this is over. But in very typical fashion, Oklahoma's offensive line typically does not play well early in the season. They're an offensive line that actually typically ends up getting much and much better as the season goes on, from that cohesiveness perspective. And so I think you still like what you have there. I think they'll continue to improve and continue to be better. But yeah, no, I think everything offensively was fine. They play, obviously when you put up 73 points, they could have scored 100 if they wanted to. So that's good. Defensively, the biggest thing that you go forward and say you like the depth that they've got across all 3 levels of the defense. Even though this is not the greatest team in the world that you played against in terms of what that looked like. From a talent perspective, you still got to shut out. And that's something that obviously Oklahoma wasn't able to do a year ago. They gave up, 13 against UTEP, and so that's an extreme positive as you go and you build with this young team as they continue to get better and go forward. Probably the biggest concern that, and I don't know how much of a concern this will be. You need to get a couple more games in and get a better sample size for this. But I think the pass rush wasn't quite, what you would like or what you would expect for Oklahoma. Certainly, like I said, that can be better, and that could be part of the game plan. There was not a lot of, exotic blitzes and a lot of things to, really exploit that, so to speak. But that was the only, really didn't get a whole lot of pressure. I think I had 1 sack late in the game, but not a whole lot, other than that for Oklahoma. But like I said, only gave up no points, 10 first downs, 208 yards of total offense, forced Arkansas State to go 2 of 12 on third downs. Likewise, Oklahoma was 11 of 13 on third down conversion. So those are a lot of the things that you really, really like if you're an Oklahoma fan. Some of those things, there's a few penalties, but not much for Oklahoma. Just kind of going through the box score here. For the Sooners specifically, Dylan Gabriel, 19 of 22, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Jackson Arnold, 11 for 11, 114 yards with a score. Jackson Arnold looked fantastic for Oklahoma. So I think, obviously, there's not going to be any sort of a quarterback controversy, or even competition, so to speak, at this point. But I think everything that you're doing with Jackson Arnold is preparing you for next year. In the SEC, but then also it's preparing you, if something were to happen to DG, then you feel comfortable and very confident in what you got from a backup perspective with Oklahoma, with Jackson Arnold. Looked the part without a doubt. Total for Oklahoma, 49 carries for 220 yards, 6 touchdowns on the ground. Javonte Barnes led the way, 13 carries for 49 yards. Tawee Walker, 8 carries for 44. Jackson Arnold, 5 for 39. Marcus Major, 9 for 31. And then you've got Caleb Hicks in there a little bit later, 3 for 14. Dylan Smothers, 7 for 16. So, I think, like I said, the running back core was really solid, really deep. Is really deep. And then you got the wide receivers. You had a lot of different guys making catches. Jaquays Pettaway led the way in terms of number of receptions for 9 catches for 56 yards. A lot of those were really those bubble screens on the end there. And then, but you got Nick Anderson with a really long grab. He led the way, 2 catches for 68 yards. Andrew Anthony had, again, the same thing, 3 catches for 66 yards. Drake Stoops, before the injury, 4 for 56. Jaden Gibson, 2 for 54, including the touchdown. Gavin Freeman, 4 for 19, including the touchdown. So a lot of different guys, got in the act. As you see, 10 guys had a catch for Oklahoma. So that's my kind of my synopsis here. Again, I think it's going to be really interesting for Oklahoma as they go next week and they play SMU, a team. Obviously, that's going to be a much better team than what Oklahoma saw, particularly on the offensive side of the ball for SMU, just kind of challenging this Oklahoma defense maybe a little bit more than they were today. Just for you guys that followed, SMU actually played Louisiana Tech, won that game 38-14 today against Louisiana Tech. So had 457 yards of total offense. So I think it's certainly a much more formidable team for Oklahoma to face. And so we'll get into some other stuff right now. Just people that are watching, Colorado looks like they might be able to finish this upset over TCU. They're up, I think it looks like 45-42 late in the game, less than a minute to go. So yeah, we'll get into your comments and questions and anything like that. Question is Arkansas State bad or OU just good? Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I believe Arkansas State plays in Memphis next week. If I'm not mistaken, they play Memphis next week, and then they have an FCS opponent after that. Either that, or maybe vice versa. But yeah, no, that's always the interesting thing for me. And as I mentioned, Colorado's up 45-42. 44 seconds left, 3rd and 2 for Colorado. TCU does not have any timeouts left, so if they're able to, looks like Colorado just got the first down, and that's going to be the ball game. So just a big time win for Prime in game 1. TCU is a little bit, the question was, could they pull with everything that they lost last year? Can they run that back again? And Colorado was getting dissed big time, about the team that they put together. Would they be able to win and be competitive? And they, in game 1 with Prime, and Shadir Sanders was excellent for TCU. I have multiple screens here, and I was able to watch that game at the same time. And yeah, he had over 500 yards through the air. So again, TCU may not necessarily be quite as good as they were a year ago. Zoom, our QBs weren't missing throws at all. No, definitely. No, I think they're neither quarterback was missing throws. I think they were about, as perfect as you can be, as you can think about with and I'm just looking at it here. I can't remember the exact, 30 for 33, 422 yards. Doing that against air is tough, let alone doing that against the defense. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, Gibson was the guy that, for me, Jimmy, was probably the biggest. I don't know what the surprise is the right word, but I was pleased with the most because he's a guy that, at his size, he has the ability to be a big-time player and a big-time weapon for Oklahoma, not only down the field, but in short yardage situations and in end zone situations and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's very pleasantly surprising. It's a really, really good. Yep, sharp. This is the sharpest opener that Oklahoma has had, and in quite some time. Last year, maybe this is a little bit of a worse team than what Oklahoma saw last year in a couple of the early season non-conference games with UTEP and Kent State. But still, to win a game by over twice as many points as you were favored to win. I think it was a 34, 35 point line. And Oklahoma won that game by 73. Again, you have to assume there's a little bit on both sides, right? In terms of there's Arkansas State's probably not quite as bad as they showed in this game, and perhaps that played into how well Oklahoma played, or at least looked in this game. So yeah, I think that's will be very interesting to see as we go forward next week. TCU is trash. Yeah, they did not look good at all today. Did not look at all. Yeah, Jimmy, I'm not sure. We've talked about Oklahoma almost pretty much throughout here. Yeah, I think there's a lot to take away. The receiver room, and as we talked through that, the receiver room looked really, really good. I think that was a little bit of an issue last year for Oklahoma, right? That the depth wasn't there. Once they got into conference play, there was not a whole lot of separation and things of that nature that Oklahoma was able to take advantage of. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big time. That's a big time benefit this year, knowing that they can go 6 to 8 deep. Now, I think the one thing will be interesting to see is what is the depth of the injury to Drake Stoops. I heard early on that it looked like they felt like that was more of a like a dislocation and a sprain type of situation, and wasn't serious. And then I heard later on in the telecast that maybe there wasn't quite as much optimism with that. So we'll continue to kind of keep an eye on that and see and see what that looks like in terms of what his prognosis is. So I haven't heard a couple of questions here. I haven't really heard anything specifically about what the prognosis is, and we probably won't hear anything just yet. But I'll keep my eye on that as we're talking as we're going through this today. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot to be. Sorry, it's cinema. I didn't put your comment on here. A lot to be excited about if you're an Oklahoma fan, without a doubt, in that win. A lot to build on both sides of the ball. I think it'll be, as I mentioned, SMU is a much tougher team, particularly defensively or offensively. They've got a lot of talent there, so it'll kind of remain to be seen what that will look like. But 24-point win, like I said, 24-point win for them. Preston Stone, new quarterback for them this week. 23 out of 37, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. They ran for over 200 yards in the game. Again, Louisiana Tech's not a world beater, but certainly this will be very interesting. Very interesting next week. Yep. So Jimmy, get well soon, stupid now. Yeah, I think that's probably the area. You'll get a little bit more from Petaway, maybe a little bit more from even Gavin Freeman a little bit. So I think let's see what that looks like. And yeah, I think the depth again. If you see some injuries for Oklahoma, at different positions, the rally cry for this team has been the competitive depth. All fall camp, all spring, just for the guys that they brought in. So when that happens, let's see what that looks like. So he's one. Deshaun McCullough early on, I think he had a little bit of an ankle thing. Again, from what I heard, that would be something that it wasn't going to be anything serious, but we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. Again, he's a guy that's, from a depth perspective, he's right there with Justin Harrington, in playing that cheetah position as well. So like I said, a lot of good stuff for Oklahoma. Like the only two negatives that I saw, and really they're kind of wait and see negatives: offensive line and pass rush. Offensive line was good, not great. Pass rush was, I mean, fairly non-existent. I know that they were getting the ball out of JT Shrout's hand pretty quickly, but not sure exactly what that will look like as we continue to go through the season. There's not a whole lot of blitzing that Oklahoma did, and Venables drew up. So we'll see, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, you would expect that with a game like this where Oklahoma expected to win, fairly convincingly, that they weren't going to show a whole lot to some of their opponents and things like that, and what that looks like. So, but yeah, the secondary looked good. The key, I think, Gentry. I mean, your two corners, Gentry Williams and Woody Washington, both played really, really well. Gentry had really that big time hit coming up and tackling that. I think that was just a screen pass early on, or in that game. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see as we go forward, and in what ways that could they generate pressure, because I think that's the key. Last year was a lot of these quarterbacks for other teams, really had the opportunity to just sit back there and pick apart the Oklahoma secondary. And your secondary's best friend is a pass rush. So if you can get a good pass rush early on, then I mean that really kind of leads to a much better much better defense overall. You don't have to cover so long. So we'll see as this time goes, and I think this is the schedule sets up in such a way that Oklahoma is going to be able to progressively get better. We've talked about this a lot, right? With, with Oklahoma starting with Arkansas State, then have SMU where that kicks up a little bit. Tulsa's probably not quite as good as SMU, but the game is on the road, so to speak. So you get an opportunity to see, what that looks like in terms of what a road game looks like. Then you've got Iowa State and Cincinnati before Texas. So the schedule is set up very, very attractively for Oklahoma to be able to kind of ease your way into a lot of things before you get to Texas. So it will be very interesting to watch. Next week, without a doubt. Oklahoma's probably, I would say, somewhere in the neighborhood of a 18 to 21 point favorite coming into this game next week against SMU. But yeah, a much better opponent. And then, it's hard to take away anything from Tulsa, that game that they played against, I think it was Arkansas Pine Bluff, really a bad FCS opponent. So we'll get a little bit better look at them, I think, next week. But very, very positive overall. Was much better than I anticipated. Not that I anticipated it being bad, but 73 points was not point victory was not necessarily what I anticipated. But then I think when you look at that, what Oklahoma did last year in certain situations, I think that's an extremely positive performance for Oklahoma to start off with. So I know there's not a whole lot of questions here with this being the first game, and really not a whole lot of things went wrong. Arkansas State really didn't do a whole lot right in this game this week. Absolutely. I think Gavin Freeman could be a big game changer for Oklahoma. I mean, if nothing else in the punt return game, he's going to, he's just electric with the ball in his hands. So I think Oklahoma, you just saw a lot different. There's just a lot of difference in this team, right? I'm not going to, I've told, a lot of people and talked to a lot of people about this, that Oklahoma's not, it's not going to be something that I overreact to early on. I'm really going to kind of hold my, I wouldn't say my true feelings, but really go overboard one way or the other until you get into conference season, right? I mean, I think a lot of us were, as we watched Oklahoma early on in the season, and then they, against, everything that looked great against Nebraska, then they came back against Kansas State, and it didn't look good defensively, and it continued to get worse. So we will continue to see how that goes and take it one game at a time. There's always sometimes a lot of overreactions to week one way or the other. So we'll continue to monitor that and see what that looks like. SMU should be exactly, Jimmy. I agree completely. Oklahoma is such a better team so far in the non-conference. I think you take this with what you saw early on last year. You see a team that's more comfortable in both of the systems. You see a team that's much deeper than what they were previously last year. I think you just see that a second-year program is much different than a first-year program. So, again, we'll continue to see what that was, what that will be, and move forward. So, it's not because most people acted like we had no wide receivers. Yeah, I think that was the consensus coming in. There's a lot of question marks around that wide receiver position. So, I think that's a fair comment right there. So, okay. Well, just looking at some other things going on across the country. An interesting, Texas is right now beating Rice 7-3. That's about the only big-time game going on right now that I can see. Notre Dame is up on Tennessee State 7-3. Let's see. Cincinnati's up early on 14-0 over Eastern Kentucky. And so, but a lot of good football. I think one interesting game in the Big 12 later on tonight is Texas Tech at Wyoming. That'll be interesting. Texas Tech is a real trendy pick to potentially make it to the Big 12 championship game this year. I know there's been a couple of people that have predicted that. I think it's interesting. They go to Wyoming and then they host Oregon. So, you look at those two games and that could be, honestly, a little bit of a feast or a famine type of situation. Right, if you win those two games, you're setting yourself up to be a really, really good football team. But if you lose those two games, you can lose a little confidence as you roll into conference season. So, yeah, no, absolutely, Lucas, I agree. Improvement from Jaden Gibson was really, really solid and big time. So, okay. No, there's not. I remember I didn't anticipate a whole lot of questions and comments. We'll get cranking this upcoming week and get ready for a game that should be a little bit more competitive against SMU. I'll learn a little bit more, maybe not necessarily completely competitive, but more so than this one. And you learn a little bit more about the team as we continue to go on. So thanks for jumping on here with me. Like I said, remember to me and Mark will probably go live at some point this week. We'll do our Oklahoma tailgate on Friday and then get cranked up again a little bit later, game time with a kickoff, I believe, at 5 p.m. On ESPN Plus next Saturday inside Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. So we'll do our post game around the 8:39-ish time next year. So make sure you're dialed in, both the OU channel and the Big 12 channel. And we got you set up here. So everybody have a great rest of your weekend. Boomer Sooner, and God bless.